talking to book people about books and other stuff.
Welcome to episode 2 of Talking to Book People about books and other stuff. And in a minute, I'm going to give a call to Jessie Burton, author of The Confession. And before that, The Muse and of course, The Miniaturist, which is a huge debut novel. Like the rest of us, she's stuck at home, and I'm going to give her a quick ring now, and we'll find out whether or not she's managing to write, managing to read, and what's going on. So let's give her a ring. Hi, Jessie. How's it going? Where are you? Which part of the world are you in? Have you managed to be in your own home for this situation?
Yes, I have managed to be in my own home. I have a garden, so I feel very lucky, especially with weather like this.
Yeah.
And I'm just here with my partner and my cats. And so actually, given that I work from home most of the time, honestly, for the first sort of 2 or 3 weeks, I struggled to really notice, within my own home, particular change, except for the fact that my partner now works. I have a co-worker who I meet for lunch.
Right, okay.
But before I literally just talk to my cats.
In terms of your community, have you noticed anything? Are neighbours being more neighbourly? Have you got to know people?
I had quite a nice relationship with my neighbours anyway. I sort of feel like when I go for my state-sanctioned walk, I was always very aware of other people, but now I'm sort of looking at them and wondering how they're doing and how they're feeling and what might their home situation be when they go home, and the different ways in which people handle it have, come into my life, like friends who are coping or not coping, who have very different family situations. My parents are both well into their 70s. And my mum is in the risk group, not the highest, but she has asthma, type 2 diabetes, and always gets the flu or pneumonia. So it's I'm quite anxious about her, but she's extremely buoyant. It has brought out really generous sides of people, and I see it not so much towards myself because I'm very capable, but like towards them when I'm not there. Like, it's really nice, and one of their neighbours has set up a newsletter.
Oh, really?
The main theme of the newsletter last week was, has anyone lost a hamster because our cat brought one in and it's dead?
Oh, wow, that's a bit after the fact, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just strange, isn't it? We've just been stripped back, and I'm such a forward planner. I'm such a plotter and planner and dreamer, and I have had everything, like all of us, all our plans totally out the window. Like little plans, big, huge existential plans. But actually, there's something quite not freeing, because it would be wrong to say this situation is liberating, because it's literally the opposite, but there is a paradox within it that we have been forced to become very simple in our lives. It's really interesting.
Well, yeah, there is. And I mean, it has all sorts of strange effects. Whatever. Have you taken up new skills or hobbies, or has any of that happened, apart from being better at, being even more efficient at various forms of IT education for...
I need to become an IT expert. No, I mean, I really did crash after the first week of it. Something very strange happened to me, and I think there was a sort of external message. Oh, well, this is the perfect time for creativity. This is, now you can write your novel. And then I saw a really funny tweet. Someone said, everyone everywhere is about to discover that having loads of time to yourself doesn't make you write. I felt very guilty that I wasn't being productive, that I wasn't doing anything, and it was this sort of paralysis, and I felt very worried about it. And I put it out there on Instagram, and actually I was really interested. Like, so many people wrote back to me saying, thank you for saying this, because there's this sort of idea that we have to suddenly learn 3 languages or write a novel or as artistic or creative people respond immediately and produce work that will make people feel comfortable and make ourselves. And it's like, no, you've got to take time to process this. Everything that takes time, but something like this is beyond our comprehension in real time. And then gradually I've gotten back into the swing of things. It was weird. I think it was partly because for the last 6 years of my life, I've been doing this. I have been in self-isolation, obviously not with all the social distancing restrictions.
Right.
When my boyfriend started his job here without his colleagues and without those connections and that interaction, that human interaction, I felt very sorry for him. And I pitied him, and then I realised, but that's what I've been doing, and actually it's really not a good way to live, and you can't write a novel any other way really, other than on your own. But it suddenly hit me, the effect that it can have on you psychologically to not have people to work with, have people around. And I went through this like mini period of grief, mourning, because I used to be an actress and I used to be a PA, and so I would have felt the lockdown differently had that all suddenly been robbed of me. But something else kind of was brought to my attention, that this has been this kind of self chosen quarantine that is the writing life, has its downsides. I did, for a while just go, what is the point of me doing this? And then weirdly, around those thoughts, unprompted, that I got lots of messages from people saying, I've just read your book in lockdown in Spain in Spanish, and thank you so much for, like, this woman had read the Muse and she was like, you filled my weekend with so much colour and escape and beauty. And I've been getting a lot of those, and if I'm getting them, I know other writers will be getting them too. And I've noticed on my Instagram so many more tags of people reading in lockdown. And so I know what my role is in this. It's not as important or as crucial or as time important as what the scientists and the medical community and the care community are doing. But you do what you do, right?
What about your reading? Have you been reading during this? And has your reading changed, or is there anything different to what have you been drawn to during this?
I found myself very much not enjoying books where everyone's having a miserable time. Right. I've been sent some really brilliantly well-written and interesting books, but they're about sort of gnarly psychological, domestic setting books. And I put them to one side, but the books I have enjoyed have tended to be very vivid in sense of place, and quite often quite historical, or just the writing is so beautiful or lyrical, or like really smacks you in the gut. The book that I'm loving at the moment is The Base Rock, Evie Wild's
new book.
Which is dark but also just so brilliantly written, so that I just take a writerly appreciation at how gifted she is. And then Hamnet, Maggie O'Farrell, I couldn't believe what I was reading. Like, I was like, oh my god, she's a psychic. This plague setting, the emotional effects of plague on a family. I mean, but also just the beauty of the lyricism and the imagery. It's a very, it's so brilliantly written, because that kind of Shakespeare is there. He's sort of liminal, but it's not about him, and it's just, yet it's so Shakespearean. Anyway, so I love that, and I read The Mirror and the Light. So again, another immersive, quite in quotes, escapist setting. And then a lovely book called Love After Love by Ingrid Persaud, who is a debut writer. It's a Faber book. She's Trinidadian or part Trinidadian, British, and she wrote this book, and it's set in Trini, but it's an America, and it's just joyous. Like, it's funny, you laugh out loud at it, but you also bawl. It's very moving. It's a real recommend, that one. I loved it. So I'm reading well.
I wanted to ask about the confession in particular. It's interesting that in this book, you, for the first time, you kind of have a character set now. You have so you've got a time period split as you had with the Muse. But specifically, I wondered also what it was like to write a character of something very, very modern compared to the previous setting.
I mean, so just to briefly describe the book, it's set in 1980s London, 2018 London, and Hollywood in the 1980s. And it's about, in the modern strain, we have a young woman called Rose who's very adrift in her own life. Her mother left her when she was a baby, and she always feels that obviously has created such a hole in her life, and has basically influenced the entire direction of her life. And her search for her mother brings her into the path of a novelist called Connie Holden, who is a bit of a recluse these days. And the other part of the book tells us the story of Connie in the 80s meeting Rose's mother, Elise, who is again another lost soul. I wanted to write about daughterhood and motherhood, about things that always seem to interest me, about female agency and creativity and the way that we can, as creative people, live normally or live lives, and the effect that that has on the people around us. And I'm very interested in performance, and that's probably why the book has Hollywood and films and fantasy and reality and making oneself up. Those things interest me. And again, it's very interesting because I know that, you know, when you write your first novel and it was so much a historical novel, it's, you know, entrenched in 1686 Amsterdam, and then you go and you write something set in 30s Spain and 60s London. I suppose to me, yes, that, you know, those were historical books, but they were, I don't think I ever intended to become a historical fiction writer. I think it was just when I saw the Cabinet House in Amsterdam, the story was going to be rooted in that period of history and that society at the time. And then what I wanted to write about immigration into Britain in the 60s, and Britain as a country, and the colonial relationship we have that we don't really understand fully, I think, as a country. That's why I had to sort of incorporate the war, the Spanish War. So this book, The Confession, is more modern. And I suppose there were probably things as a writer I had evolved, and I wanted to explore things that were potentially more contemporaneous. The idea about, you know, how to find a place to belong that you're comfortable in your own skin, and how to compromise or how to live with compromise, and how to understand loss and how to live in the grey areas, I suppose, of life. But then I really feel that the other two books do that too. Those characters are both all trying to find places to belong or to sort of find comfort. And I guess I got to a point in my life where I was really absorbing my friends' stories of maternity or lack thereof, or no desire to be a mother. And I did dedicate the book to my friends, and it is a sort of love letter to all the women I know who I just think are so interesting and brave as people, that I don't know, it was just my way of saying I see you, and I understand that, you know, we all have different paths. So
the place element is interesting, and especially as you talked about in your reading about, you know, you're being drawn to place. You've said before, and you just mentioned then, that, you know, the miniaturist, you know, one of the sparks for the book was seeing the actual doll's house there in Amsterdam. So LA, is that somewhere that you spent time, or is it because of the acting that you were drawn to that? Do you always tend to set your books so far in places that you are either intrigued by or have actually, you know, a connection to, and or is place secondary to the themes of motherhood and what have you?
It's symbiotic. I think place does have a huge effect on me, where if I've been in a place, it does manifest itself, it reconfigures itself in my fiction. So in answer to your question, I did spend time in Los Angeles, a very brief 6 days, and it had such an impact on me that, and I don't journal, I don't have a diary, but I did write about it. I was just like gobsmacked by the place, and not in the necessarily positive way. I was what is this place? And I found it fascinating. I knew I wanted to incorporate it somehow, and it was just so perfect to write about a city that is the kind of home of Hollywood, of dreams, of movies, of dashed dreams and desperate behaviour to become successful and famous, and you know, the reality, the tawdry reality at times behind the beauty and the glamour. So it was a fun thing to write, especially compared to the dark and the damp and the mist of Amsterdam.
Listen, and when this all finishes, where's the first place you're going to rush to?
I'd love to go to Amsterdam, actually. I really want to go back. I mean, it's partly because I did have plans to go there, and that's gone. And, you know, I'm deliberately trying not to sort of fantasize too deeply.
No, I think that's advice.
On Instagram, I did see someone's photos of the Amalfi Coast.
Oh, yeah.
And I've never been. And there's something about the vibrancy of the colours of the sea and the houses. But also, you know, just literally walking into my friend's house might be a holiday, because it's like not my normal space.
Listen, I had one last thing that I just wanted to talk to you about. I was thinking about the miniaturist, and I thought about people who I know, friends of ours, and I wondered if they had had any involvement with the miniaturists, and it turns out they did. They apparently built part of the house for the film. These guys called Mulvaney and Rogers.
Oh my god!
You know them? You know
Yes,
them?
I know them.
Because I mean, they are the
Yeah, I mean they are
miniaturists.
they're the
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Oh, you know, it's such a funny thing. Isn't that funny? Because way before I wrote The Miniaturist, I went to the Kensington Dolls House Festival.
Okay.
And there was this man standing there, and his doll's house and his work was just like head and shoulders above. And it was Kevin.
Yeah.
That's his name, isn't
Right.
it?
Kevin, yeah, Kevin Mulvaney.
Yeah. And I just asked him a few questions. I didn't tell him what I was doing. I was just really interested to get into the head of a miniaturist.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And he was very generous, and he just told me, obviously without names or anything, about certain client commissions, and it just blew my mind. And then we didn't meet during the production at all. I know that they worked very hard for it under like very strict time conditions.
Really? Yeah.
And what they made were just absolutely mind-blowing. And then we met finally because the Dallas Museum of Fine Art wanted to do me to do a lecture on the miniaturist and the making of miniatures, and Kevin and Susie, isn't it? Yeah, came along, and I finally got to meet the miniaturist.
Great. That's so funny. Yeah, well, they live in our village just up the road, and
when you eventually see them, will you give them a wave?
I will. Listen, thanks so much for chatting, and we'll see you on the other side.
All right, well, take care.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thanks, Jessie.
Bye. Bye.
Please note, no book people were harmed in the making of this film, though some were technologically challenged. All books are available from www.mrbeesemporium.com. Keep safe and keep reading.